schools, public and private schools in the state of California. What will you do to restore the religious exemptions in the light of vaccinations for school attendance in the state of California?
Hi there, my name is Christina Hildebrand and I am the founder and president of A Voice for Choice Advocacy. We are a California-based bipartisan nonprofit organization that educates, advocates, and empowers people to know their health rights in California. And my question today is that in California, we removed the religious exemptions for K-12 school vaccination requirements, leaving families with sincerely held beliefs without a pathway to education outside of full compliance or homeschooling. At the same time, medical exemptions are tightly restricted and subject to state review rather than physician discretion. How would you address the lack of religious exemptions in California schools, and what role do you believe parental rights and physician judgment should play in medical decision-making for children?
Okay, so there's been a shift in California laws in regards to vaccine mandates. SB 277 eliminated personal and religious exemptions. Then SB 276 and SB 714 brought medical exemptions under tighter centralized state control, including review and possible revocation, which has made many physicians far more cautious. Even SB 1377, which aimed to better protect the physician patent or patient relationship, failed to pass. So here's the question. We'll go in, we'll start with Lewis and then we'll go around the horn. As governor, what would you do to restore parental rights, protect legitimate medical exemptions, and ensure these decisions are driven by families and doctors rather than state bureaucracy?
Thank you for the question. Well, first of all, we have to understand anything that was an EO signed by Newsom can be reversed immediately. So that's going to be first on the agenda. Next, we have to install a real parental bill of rights. And this would be specific rights regarding school transparency, curriculum review, and notification requirements. But what's really, really important for me is that there's informed consent, real conformed consent. And I believe we should flip the tables on this completely. And what I mean by that is a doctor must have a signature from a patient or a parent anytime there is a drug that is recommended saying, I have full informed consent and read all the protocols and efficacies in regards to that drug and this procedure. That will flip the tables on it completely. I also want people to be very, very aware and very careful. So there was something that was called AB 495 that was positioned by one side as a way to protect immigrants and positioned by the other side as a way to steal children. The dirty little secret inside of AB 495 that passed through California is it's actually a way to force vaccinate your children. And what I mean by that is going into it before, a parent would bring their child in and they would be shamed if they didn't get their child vaccinated. Now, the doctors and the nurses can nod their heads in agreement, no problem, and then go into your school, sign your child out, and force vaccinate them. That has to be addressed immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. Now we'll go ahead and pass it over to Steve Hilton for the next one.
So this whole area is an outrageous usurpation of parental rights by the state. They keep talking about our children. It's not our children as in terms of the government. It is literally our children. And the state and the government should have nothing to do with these fundamental and vital decisions. And they dress it up in terms of public health. There's no justification for that. We saw it in the pandemic when they forced the COVID vaccine, an experimental vaccine that had no business being forced on anyone because it didn't confer any kind of public benefit. It was entirely, to the extent it had any benefits, it was private, it was personal. It didn't prevent transmission. So on and on and on, we see these elites in the medical establishment backed up by their puppet politicians just outrageously taking away rights that should be parents. So I'm strongly on the side of medical freedom and parents' rights. The question is what you can do about it. Now, these two, Lewis is right that it's within EO, you can reverse it, but the specific removal of the medical exemption and then that's over nearly 11 years ago now that happened in that bill. That was 2015. And then you've got the tightening of the medical exemptions. That's also legislation. So you can't just delete legislation. What you can do, and this is what I will do as governor, is the governor can initiate a process of overturning laws that have been passed and signed by a previous governor where they violate the California state constitution. Now, so far, legal challenges to these laws have failed. So we need to get creative and find legal arguments that can end this outrageous attack on parents' rights once and for all. Now, I won't rest until that's done.
Yep. Let's go ahead and head over to Leo.
Look, we have to make sure that our kids are getting proper medical care, but they can't be getting forced to do stuff. I mean, parental rights is paramount with all these things. And the governor has limitations on what can be done, and things like, SB 277, they're already passed by legislature. So we have to work with legislature to be able to remove those things. And we can do that by building proper rapport in the legislature and having that understanding that we're all working together on the same team. This whole partisan politics stuff, it's really what's killing everybody here in this country. I mean, certainly here in California. And as governor, I get to appoint people to these different positions. So whether it's the director for the CDPA, the California Department of Public Health, they control enforcement, and medical board members that I can appoint that would also want to make sure that they can ensure that they can punish doctors that are putting misinformation out there that are harming our children, or they can just make sure that the quality of care is out there where you're not feeling you have to do this. Our kids having to take these requirements, these vaccines, these injections just to go to school is ridiculous. I mean, if they work so well, right, the ones that have taken it should be immune from any of these illnesses. And so, we can direct a full review of, state-imposed mandate enforcement, and we can shift the priorities towards informed consent and transparency, which is paramount. People need to know what's going on. We shouldn't be having, medications being given to people where you unfold the pamphlet and it's just full of blank paper. It needs to be things that are written in plain, understandable English. And I want people to be informed. I'm very pro-information and pro-parental rights, but people need to know that they have those rights and they need to have that information available to them. And they shouldn't be forced by law to be, making these decisions with their bodily autonomy.
And now we'll throw this over to Sheriff Chad Bianco.
I think everyone is on the same page with this. I think some of the key issues in the entire question were, what are you going to do to get those exemptions back? I don't think there should be exemptions. I think the answer is just, this is what is available. And then, like has already been mentioned, the informed consent. When you have true informed consent, it's up to the parents to decide whether or not they're going to have their children vaccinated. And the bottom line is, it doesn't have to be, no one even has to say anything about whether it's a medical exemption or whether it's a religious exemption. What does it matter? It's just a parent's exemption. The government has never had children, ever. It's parents that have children, and the parents are responsible for the decisions of their kids and how they're going to raise their kids in the health environment. A lot of things can be done obviously with executive order, obviously with overruling or suspending every single thing that is not into law. However, you can also make some exemptions by declaring a state of emergency. We have to admit that there is plenty, almost overwhelming evidence out there that vaccines are causing the issues that we have with autism and many other neurological diseases and issues that our children have are caused by vaccines. And it's not like we're making this up. This isn't this group, and this is not MAHA. This is the scientific community that has hidden these studies for decades because of big pharma, because of what they're trying to do. So the bottom line is, when everyone is informed, we have found that in California, people are upset with that anyway. They realize, what do you mean that happened 5 years ago? What do you mean that law was 10 years ago? So exposure is going to be key with getting lawmakers to reverse those bills. If they're not going to reverse those bills, then we have plenty of alternative measures of executive order, of state of emergencies with just suspending, but all of that has to be done.
Yeah. Our next question is about COVID policy, medical freedom, and the California exodus. The state went further than almost anywhere in the country with lockdowns, mandates, school closures, and restrictions that upended countless lives, all while calling it leadership, which was certainly one interpretation. We asked Mickey Willis, Dr. Judy Mikovits, and Rob Schneider to frame what Californians lived through. Let's roll those videos.
My name is Mickey Willis. I am an investigative filmmaker, born and raised in California, but due to the increasingly radical policies there, particularly those surrounding the education of children, my family and I relocated to Texas in 2020. The key drivers for that move was vaccine mandates, declining literacy scores, teachers not being paid enough to care, school food quality, overcrowded classrooms, inappropriate sex education that leads to gender confusion, and last but not least, general safety. So my question for the candidates is this: what immediate changes are you committed to making that would entice this California native to feel good about bringing my kids back into that state? Thank you so much.
I'm Dr. Judy Mikovits, author of Plague of Corruption, and the former director of the National Cancer Institute's Lab of Antiviral Drug Mechanisms, the National Cancer Institute. What I want to know from any governor candidate is, are they going to support freedom, true informed consent, the teaching of this across churches, across California, across jail? If this California immunization registry doesn't go away now, it's not only unconstitutional and is legal. When are the citizens of the state of California going to get due process for what was the propaganda that was COVID?
Hi, this is Rob Schneider, former California resident. And yeah, I'm driving right now and videotaping. So what? Anyway, my question to the gubernatorial candidates is this. When I moved out of California, autism rates for children were 1 in 24. And now, for boys, it's 1 in every 12.3. How much is enough for you? How much is enough where we can say enough with this? Where is the medical freedom? Where is it going to be, I don't co-parent with the state? What is your answer for medical freedom? And how do you make sure that I don't crash right now driving and videotaping? I got to go, but I wish you the best. And let's get medical freedom for California. You can do it.
So California kept schools closed longer than most of the country, shut down businesses permanently, fired workers, displaced families, and watched hundreds of thousands of residents leave the state. At the same time, Pfizer trial data was only released after a court forced FDA's hand. Several countries, including Denmark, Sweden, and Finland, restricted mRNA vaccines for certain groups after their own safety reviews, and even CDC surveillance showed unprecedented adverse event reporting. So here's the question, and we'll start with Chad. As governor, what would you do to protect medical freedom, hold failed COVID-era policies accountable, and make sure California never again uses emergency power to crush livelihoods, silence dissent, and drive families out of the state?
It's a fantastic question. It's a big question. Rob, if you get pulled over, you can try and drop my name. If you're in Riverside County, it might work. Otherwise, I don't know. I can't help you. I will start by saying, in California, Riverside County was not like any other county in the entire state, because I was the first in the entire country to come out and say that we are not going to do that here. We hired every single law enforcement officer in California that was fired, that we hired them for not taking the vaccine. We did not close any businesses. We did not force mask mandates. We didn't force any of those things, which made Riverside County during that time the fastest growing county in the entire country. We added businesses, we added residents. So we did not lose people from Riverside County in California. And that was because of my leadership here. There is absolutely no question that what was done to us was absolutely wrong. It was completely outside the bounds of government reach and overreach, and those things were disastrous. The unfortunate part of that is, I think part of that question is, what are you going to do about them doing it? They made it legal to where it was okay, and they are shielded from that. Those shields have to be taken away. Those laws that they have passed that exempted people from prosecution or exempted people from civil claims absolutely must be removed. People that are in the business in the pharmaceutical industry, of chemicals, of things that you're doing for our kids or forcing onto our kids, you are going to be held responsible if those things are dangerous. We are no longer going down this path of forced vaccinations, of experimental drugs, where you have absolutely no recourse when your children are harmed. And just from the questions, it is extremely, extremely obvious from the the statistics from studies, not only since COVID, but well before COVID, that forcing vaccination and forcing drugs onto our kids are completely causing the issues that we have today with such an expanded number of kids with problems, whether it's neurological or even mental health issues because of forced medications or forced vaccinations. So all of that has to be removed. It all has to end. And we do have to put safeguards in our laws, in our legal system, including the civil system, to make sure that people are held accountable for harming us, and that can't be brought back and made. The governor cannot be given that authority to force that again.
Yeah, and we'll go and throw it over to Leo Zacky for his response.
Yeah, I mean, the problems with autism that are directly related to vaccines, and especially the COVID vaccines, they're real. There's no denying it. I mean, I have personal friends who have had their children suffer autism because of this, like Casey Call, for example, up in Fresno. His son has autism, which he didn't have prior to being forced to take these injections, right? But it was because he was given bad information and he felt forced to do it because the schools needed to have him vaccinated to go to school. And this is unfair pressure that's being put on people and parents across the state and definitely across the country here. My friend died during COVID, and it was all a big money grab, right? Because I wasn't allowed to go and be in the chapel. I had to sneak into the cemetery to be graveside, for that. These were all things that so many Californians experienced, and it was an absolute violation of our civil rights. And it's all money driven. It's all profit driven. We saw all the money that was going, towards, labeling people, infected with COVID at the hospitals. Right? They get money for the bed. They get money if they're intubated, money if they died in their care. It was just a big money grab. And that's the problem, is that we've lost the humanity, and there's all this legal stuff put into place to protect that. And so, as governor, I can audit all these policies, these contracts, these decisions, and I could publish the results and make that all available to people. Like the fact that this even took place and people felt compelled to leave. I mean, their businesses were closed. I mean, how many of you out there were not allowed to go into a restaurant or a business because you didn't have your papers, you didn't have your card that said you were clean, you were of that. We developed two different, strata of people here in this country under that. And it was just unbelievable violation of our rights. So no wonder people would leave. So to get people back, we have to be able to show transparency. We have to limit the emergency powers that a governor has, because they run wild with that. If everything's declared an emergency, it can be useful to a certain degree, but there's a lot of overbearingness that comes to that. We have to be able to limit the powers of government. And in that position, I will do just that, to make sure that we don't have this dictatorial power come in and limit, and not only limit, but remove our rights here in California.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and throw it over to Louis Herms.
Yeah, this is fascinating, actually, because I did a small documentary on this 6 years ago called The Big COVID Lie. And it explained exactly what the intent was. And I think it's very important that we don't gloss over that there may have been intent here in regards to COVID, the shutdowns, and the control mechanism. Some people call it a pandemic, some people call it whatever. But the reality is, even in 2009, the definition in the three major dictionaries of pandemic was changed. And it went from virtually dying in the streets to whatever three-letter agencies tell you it is. That seems like it's planned to me, and that's a concern. And then when you add in, as Leo said, the incentives, every portion of the way, I take a COVID test, you get paid. COVID positive, paid. Hospitalization, paid. Remdesivir, paid. So on and so forth. Even trying to convince people that you'll give them money to make sure they sign off on a death certificate. Well, when you incentivize healthcare, what do you think is going to happen? But we also have to educate the public and understand one thing: mandates are not law. In fact, the reason why I'm sure that Chad was able to do what he did is because he understood mandates are not law. They are an example of what the government wants us to do. All we have to do is say no. It was a corpocracy that actually enforced these mandates. So education is a huge part of this. In order to prevent the mass exodus, you need a governor in place that will never kowtow down to this, and also try to remove all the protections that the pharmaceutical companies have in order to force this stuff upon us. They will never be able to do this again. And lastly, Judy Mikovits is a friend of mine, and she's taught me a lot about the immunization protocols that she has, and they're genius. This is the type of things that we need to do.
Yeah, let's go ahead and throw it over to Steve Hilton here for the last run on this question.
So as Chad said in relation to the previous question, I think we're basically all in agreement here. What we saw in the lockdowns was total tyranny. In fact, I often make the point when asked about the Second Amendment and my strong support for that. Let's remember why we have the Second Amendment, and the pandemic is a good example of this massive overreach and authoritarianism from our government. I was actually the first to argue for that. I led the resistance to the nationally to the lockdowns right at the beginning, when we were still in that 15 days to slow the spread. And I made the argument very forcefully with Charlie Kirk. Charlie and I got together that week and we said, we got to stop this, and we got to make the case to the president directly to end this nonsense that is doing so much damage right at the beginning, March 2020, and all the way through. I used to teach at Stanford University, as you mentioned. Right there, got together with the rebel epidemiologist John Ioannidis, Jay Bhattacharya. I was the first to give them a platform. That's why Jay Bhattacharya is now running NIH, because I put him out there to make the arguments. And all the way through, on every single aspect of it, the masks, the lockdowns, the school closures, I was there absolutely holding these people to account publicly. And what I said it's pretty much, I think, the first day of my campaign, by the way, I went to make sure we don't forget what they did to us. I went up to the Pineapple Hill Saloon in Los Angeles, where you had Angela Marsden, who went viral during the lockdowns when she defied Newsom's outdoor dining ban. And then she saw right next to her in the parking lot a completely, massive outdoor dining area for some crony of Newsom's film production company that got the permit to do it. And that's the kind of thing went on. I was a restaurant owner. I started a couple of restaurants in London back in the day. The way that small businesses were treated and big businesses stayed open, absolutely disgusting. We must never let them forget this. And that's why I announced right at the beginning of my campaign, we are going to have a COVID Accountability Commission. And we are going to push as far as we can to get criminal accountability for this and accountability in every other way possible. One last thing I'll say, I was the first to lay out the evidence that it was Fauci's experiments that created this in the first place. I was the first one to do that. The first one. And that's another example of the accountability we need. Biden gave him a pardon from federal prosecution. That doesn't apply at the state level. So we are going to push for the accountability to make sure this never happens again.
Yeah. The McCullough Foundation published a report reviewing more than 300 studies on potential contributors to autism spectrum disorder, pointing to a convergence of factors including genetic predisposition, neuroimmune biology, environmental toxicants, perinatal stressors, and different exposures. The report also notes the sharp rise in autism prevalence over recent decades and argues that California should be willing to take a serious look at what is driving these numbers, whether that means pesticides, heavy metals, ultra-processed foods, or other environmental and medical factors. In other words, this is not something to wave away with a slogan and a press release, which is usually how failing institutions try to look busy. Our next question comes from Dr. Joel Warsh, a board-certified pediatrician in integrative pediatrics and medicine in Los Angeles, and it gets to the heart of the MAHA agenda and the chronic disease crisis affecting our children. Dr. Warsh asks, I care deeply about the health of our children. What I'm seeing is alarming. Nearly 50% of kids are living with a chronic disease, and California has some of the highest autism rates anywhere, now approaching 1 in 12.5 boys. This is central to the MAHA agenda, but it should be a bipartisan priority. I'm going to throw this to Leo first. Will you make addressing autism and childhood chronic disease a top state priority? And what specifically measurable actions will you take?
Absolutely. Autism is clearly on the rise, and it's impacting so many people. I mean, you get so many amazing cases of people that get these sort of superpowers from it, but there's so many people that are so debilitated from autism, and it's clearly linked to vaccine-related injuries and the things that we're putting in our bodies, whether it's poisonous food coming from pesticides, herbicides, glyphosate, or just simply the vaccines that are being mandated to kids to have to go to school or for work requirements. And we're seeing that children that are perfectly born healthy, that are being inoculated, right out of the womb, boom, 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 just a long list of injections. It's all full of like mercury and all sorts of garbage that's in there. So of course, autism has to get squashed here in California because it's what California is putting into the food system. It's what they're putting into the children. We all have the ability to look at what's going on and say, this isn't acceptable. So having people that are appointed to different positions in the agriculture department, in the food department here in California, that we can limit and restrict that. But we have to give our farmers the tools that they need to not have to require those pesticides, those herbicides. And those tools are going to be things like water. We shouldn't have poison fluoride in our water, into our tap system, but our farmers need to have an abundance of water so they don't have to be forced to rely on poisons like that entering the food system. So as long as I can put people in, positions like the California Department of Public Health, right? I have a director in there that can conduct honest, independent investigations, into environmental and food-based and pharmaceutical contributors. We can actually get the real results and make them public so that people are informed. And with the bully pulpit of governor, you can educate the people to get them up in arms and upset about this, and we can force the hand of legislature to make sure that these things get banned.
Yeah, okay, let's throw it over to you, Lewis.
And unmuted. So interesting in regards to the children and the health and the autism, it's been on a drastic rise, as many people know. I've done a lot of study on this, and I do see direct correlation to childhood vaccine protocols, but there's also environmental poisons that we don't talk too much about. And we're talking air, food, water, so on and so forth. So day one, we're going to create a mega Maha task force. And what they were going to do is they're going to go in and do full investigations on all these protocols. And the reason why we're going to do a full investigation, not an assumption, because I think we're going to get a big pushback from the medical industry and big pharma. Therefore, we have to do our own double-blind studies and so on and so forth. But we will absolutely move to remove any mandates in regards to childhood vaccine protocols. We're going to follow closely along to what Secretary Kennedy has done, and we're going to abolish the Western Health Alliance that I think Gavin Newsom has put together just to restrict us and control us. Those protocols alone are going to be very, very important to move forward. But we have to understand education is most important here. And I believe the people just don't know what they don't know. So we're going to have a massive education protocol so they can understand what they're getting into, and then they can make informed choice, as I said earlier, which they will have to sign off on, saying, I have the informed choice, I read it, and I still made the decision to move forward on this.
We'll throw this over to Steve Hilton now.
So I really liked what Leo and Lewis both said and the way they said it. I don't have that much to add to it other than to strongly agree, and to say that I would take the same approach. But I would just add that there's an aspect to this that is so insulting to so many, millions of parents across the world now, where for years and years and years, what they know and can see about their own children, you have all these experts just saying, you're wrong, don't believe your instincts as a mother or a father, we know best. It's just so outrageous the way that the medical establishment and, backed up by the political establishment has treated people. It's incredibly offensive. I really... a good friend of mine, Nicole Shanahan, for example, she's obviously an incredibly loud and strong voice on this alongside Bobby Kennedy in the campaign and prior to that and post that. And it's just, I've learned so much from her about this. And I think that we've got to be very clear that we cannot go on with a situation where the instincts and the knowledge and the love of parents is just dismissed by so-called experts. So it's not just the specific things we have to change. That whole attitude of experts know best and we have to go along with whatever they say, that has to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll throw it over to Chad now.
Yeah, along with everybody else, but I'm going to go one step further and say that I've read other studies. It's not 50%, or I've seen definitely different studies that it's not 50% with chronic disease. It's up to 70%, 75% of the United States of our population has some type of chronic disease. God did not make us that way. And God did not decide that in 1980, he was going to make us the sickest country in the world. And every single year we would get sicker and sicker. This goes directly back to food. It goes directly back to pesticides. It goes directly back to the chemicals, the vaccines, all of those things that were forced from the 60s. But as it progressed through the years up until now, where we have these vaccines, I mean, we're going to be up to 100 vaccines if we don't stop it, that we're forcing into our kids. The issue is the forcing by government into our kids, into our people, and everything else, and it all has to stop. And I will go a step further and say that I will declare a state of emergency in California, because our medical costs are the #1 driver of our budgets. In the entire country, we pay more for medical than any other issue, and it's so everyone else can make money. And I will say, I don't have to read anything. I've already read it all. I've already lived it all, because myself, I have been nothing but Whole Foods since 2002. Denise went through cancer in 2014 with holistic, nothing but food and holistic. And then since then, I mean, we've gone so far to the extreme, and I'm not going to say I'm going to push this on everybody else, but we are completely carnivore. We have both removed cancer from our bodies with nothing but food. We don't take medicine. We don't take vaccines. We don't do anything like that. And we are very healthy. And we know from the studies that are already out there that food is the answer, and eliminating the environmental toxins that money is forcing into our system. And you can stop that as a governor.
Yeah. Now we're going to move on to our next question, which is a video submitted by Zen Honeycutt, founder of Moms Against America and Moms Across America, excuse me. And it deals with toxicity in our food and the broader chronic disease crisis. California still follows federal standards that allow CalFresh dollars to be used on plenty of non-nutritious products, which is a fairly efficient way to subsidize the problem and then act surprised by the outcome. At the same time, even when the state had a chance to take stronger action on PFAS through SB 682, that effort was vetoed. So the question here is whether California is actually willing to get serious about nutritional integrity and toxic exposure. So here is Zen Honeycutt with her video question.
California governor candidates. California moms and moms across America want to know, seeing as California produces the largest amount of produce that American consumers eat in the country, you have the most influence over whether or not we are exposed to toxic chemicals through our produce. What are you going to do to reduce the exposure to toxic chemicals to American consumers and support our physical, mental, and reproductive health? Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll throw it over to you, Chad, to kick it off. But will you take concrete action to clean up the food supply, reduce toxic exposure, and use the power California already has, whether through CalFresh policy, state regulation, or broader public health leadership, to stop feeding families a system that is making them sick?
Absolutely. So, I mean, there are so many different nuances to this question that we could go on forever. The answer is absolutely yes. California used to be 90% producer of food for the country. We're down to 60. With me as the governor, we will get back up to the 90%, or at least relatively close, maybe even more than that, because so much farming has been lost in the rest of the country. And California has the ability to get up that high. I will say that the California agenda and the current government that we have, the current state government we have, is so hypocritical, it isn't even funny, because there are regulations that force our farmers to use chemicals that are dangerous that no other state uses, and it's all about the money. It forces them to use chemicals that are more expensive than any other part of the country, driving up the cost of services and goods here, or produce here, and they're forced to do it, driving them out of business. And it has nothing to do with the environment. It has nothing to do with us as humans. It is all about money. As the governor, you can eliminate all of that with the welfare programs that we have here, with the CalFreshes. It doesn't matter what you say, what you call it. Those are to help people. That is not a lifestyle. That is not go out and buy your chips and go out and buy your dip and your sodas and everything else. That is a lifestyle to make you healthy. We will not only completely redo the waste, fraud, and the abuse of that, but we are going to start basic at school level. And with me as your governor, there will be an absolute requirement in our school systems that every single bit of the food served to our kids is going to come from California ag, whether it's farms or ranches. We are not going to buy processed. We are not going to buy from other states, other countries. California is the only state in the country that can sustain itself year round with fruits, vegetables, and meat. And we are going to make sure we do that outside of the process and the chemical situation that we are forcing onto basically the entire U.S. that we're doing today.
Yeah, and we'll be getting to the ultra processed foods in school specifically in the next question as well, just so everybody is aware. But let's go ahead and throw it over to Lewis for the next answer.
So I've traveled this state. In fact, I'm on a 58 county tour, holding all the election ROVs accountable as we speak in my bus. And I've talked to a lot of farmers, and many farmers would like to produce healthy foods, but they have an anti-incentive to do so. Now, as a small government guy, I'm not into giving subsidies and incentives. However, the one place that I would consider doing it is absolutely, I would help subsidize the farmers so they can produce the healthiest food on the planet and compete with those that want to still use chemicals. That's the difference. They want to do it, they just can't do it. In regards to CalFresh, I would just outlaw, if it's not healthy food, sorry, you don't get money for that. That's pretty simple, pretty obvious. But the farmers really, many of them want to do the right thing. And we can bring back farming into California with the right incentives. And this is who we need to support. But we also have to look at the fluoride in the water and go as far as there's something called deuterium in the water. And when people learn about the isotope that's attached to a hydrogen molecule, 155 parts per million, and what that does to people and families in California, that's a problem that we're going to need to solve as well. So there's a lot that can be done. We just need to have the courage to do this and help work with the farmers instead of against the farmers to bring back, because guess what? Where there's health, that's livelihood, and we will thrive on every aspect in the state of California.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and throw it over to Steve Hilton.
Yeah, I just feel so strongly about this, and I say it all the time, that California should be leading the MAHA movement both across America and around the world, because we grow the healthy food that we want people to be eating. We grow the fruit and the produce and the nuts and all the things that are good, and the ranching, and and actually, to Lewis's point, of course that's right, that we need to make it possible for businesses and farmers to thrive doing this. But a big part of that is also reducing the ridiculous regulations, especially the labor regulations and some of the environmental regulations, the energy costs that make it so difficult to operate in California. Also, the restrictions on using technology, which other states don't apply. So there's a huge agenda that we have to boost our ag industry. I've spent a huge amount of time in all our agricultural areas in California, not just the Central Valley, but Imperial and Ventura and all over. Obviously, the Saline, there's so much that we can do better. And we'll talk about schools later, but we pioneered this stuff in California. Again, one of the first things I did on my campaign, I spent time with Bill Nyman, who I've known for years, Nyman Ranch, one of the absolute, models of how to do the kind of agriculture we want to see. I went into these fields in Marin County, made a video to show people how we can do things and how we should be leading in California. And this is absolutely the heart of it, because exactly as Chad says, it's all about the food. I mean, you mentioned my book, More Human. That was like 11 years ago now. The food chapter in More Human and the health chapter basically are the MAHA agenda. That was 11 years ago. I've been one way or another working for this, fighting for it. In the restaurants that I started back in England, we practiced what I preach on this. That goes back now 25 years, maybe a little bit longer than that I started those restaurants called The Good Cook in London. And so I really, really believe in this very strongly, and I will use every tool at our disposal, the appointments to the different agencies, the regulations, everything we can do to make sure that we lead on the MAHA agenda when it comes to food and what people eat.
Yeah, and Leo Zacky, we'll throw it over to you for your response.
Well, I come from an ag family. I mean, I grew up, between Los Angeles and the Central Valley. I mean, I've been around this, and the biggest issue for farmers not being able to produce the food in the quantity without the pesticides and herbicides, it really comes back to this water shortage that we're perpetually in, and it's artificial. We have to be able to create water abundance here in California, and I have a plan for water abundance where we can build out reservoirs and dams to have the hydroelectric power that we need to have the water that we need at a cheap, affordable level where we don't need to have the reliance on these pesticides. But we could take it a step further when you, as a governor, I can appoint the director of the Department of Pesticide Regulation, and we can do away with so many of these awful chemicals that they wind up leaching into the soil. We kill the living soil that is so important to farmers to be able to produce those high quality products. It gets into the water, and then we're transporting water, down south into Southern California, and that's coming full of all these pesticides and herbicides that get washed into it. So everybody's being contaminated with these poisons all across the state at different levels. I mean, the exposure to it, whether there's schools that are near fields that they're being sprayed with this, or residents and stuff like that, it all can easily be done away with, but we have to be able to provide those tools. Obviously, there's a lot of other financial factors that make farming and agriculture here very difficult in California, and it's very cost prohibitive. Fuel costs make it difficult for farmers to be able to work efficiently. The labor costs obviously are sky high. The insurance issues that we have. I mean, it's just a litany of issues that combine that create this perfect storm that we're in. But knowing that we're blessed. It's California. We're literally in the most fertile place in the country to do all this. There's no reason we can't have the highest quality food at the best possible price. And if we give our farmers that water, the tool that's more important than anything to be able to make this sufficient, we can do it at such numbers that it gets to the point where we're exporting at such a competitive price point that the money just comes into the state, and it's such an easier thing to do.
Yeah, and we're going to go and move on to our next question, which comes from Kathleen Willie, who's a Children's Health Defense follower who works in food service for a local school district. And it gets into one of the clearest examples of how slowly government moves, even when the problem is obvious. California passed AB 1264 in October of 2025, making it the first place in the world to legally define and begin removing ultra-processed foods from public schools. But the rollout stretches for years, with initial dye bans not starting until 2027, vendor reporting beginning in 2028, phased restrictions starting in 2029, and a full ban not landing until 2035. So the question is not whether the system admits there's a problem. It's why children are expected to keep eating this junk while the bureaucracy takes a leisurely decade to respond. So this is Kathleen Willie's actual question, and we're going to go ahead and we'll start with Steve first. But she writes, I work for my local school district in food service, and it is appalling to see how much processed food is served to the kids, especially for snack time. With the California legislation AB 1264 that passed in October 2025, I see that it will be another 2 to 10 years before any positive changes can be implemented. Why so long? And if you're elected, will you promise to implement these changes sooner and have a system in place that tracks these changes?
Yes, this is the corruption. This is the swamp. This is exactly what happens in Sacramento, where you get the lobbyists and the big corporate interests. They go there and they get their hands into all of this stuff, and they carve out the exemptions and the delays and whatever it is that they need. And that's how the system works. And it's a corrupt, rotten system. And so we got to just completely blow the whole thing up. Frankly, the corruption in Sacramento is just off the charts, and this is a perfect example. When it comes to schools, I mean, what are we talking about? How can we tolerate this? How do we let this go on for so long? Again, specific work that I've done where you connect schools with local farms, or another version of it, Edible Schoolyard, which is a project that I've worked on, which Alice Waters started. And that's a great way of teaching kids how to actually grow and then learn to cook. And there's so much that we can do to actually get rid of this whole culture of industrialized processed food. And we're not doing any of it, because the industrialized processed food companies have their complete grip over the legislators in Sacramento. And I'm afraid it's both parties. It's not a partisan thing. It's the system. And we've got to completely disrupt it and put the health of our children and our schools and our communities first.
Yeah. And Sheriff Bianco, we'll go to you for your response.
Yeah, I think, Steve is exactly right. This is the absolute corruption of our state government, in that these things are done behind closed doors because the lawmakers are paid, or they benefit from some type of benefit from these lobbyists, from these companies, until they're no longer in service. We have term limits on whether the legislature or the assembly or even the governor's office. So when you make these things happen after you leave office, what do you care? You accept the money in the beginning, you pass the rules, you pass the regulations, and then you're gone. You got the money, you got the benefit from it, and then you move on. You don't care about anybody else. The reality is, are we going to put somebody in there that lives it? talks about it or wants to talk about it. And I again, I'll go back to saying that I have been living this since 2002. Nothing goes into my body unless it comes from the ground. Nothing goes, it's natural food only. Denise and I have healed our bodies from disease. We have made sure that our kids have done the same. We have made sure that all of these things work. In Riverside County, we have farmers that supply school districts 100% of the food that they use in our school systems, so kids are only eating whole foods. When we go overboard and we make this, we've already talked about education. I think it was Lewis that said something about education. When everyone realizes that we are being poisoned and poisoned on purpose for the system, for the medical system, we're going to realize that we have to make drastic changes. And when you're educated, you no longer eat the processed food that you're supposed to be. And we can go one step further, and I'm not about the whole government mandate thing, but we're talking about medical issues too. And you have to take advantage not only of the information that we're giving you, but you have to live it. And if you're not going to live it, then we're not going to pay for you at the end. If you're going to poison yourself with processed food and junk and everything else, and you're 800 pounds and you're sucking up the medical system, we're not going to pay for it. That was you. So there's so many different issues that we have to abide by and stick with, that it's going to take a massive amount of effort to change current government.
And Leo Zacky, we'll throw it over to you next.
So I've been around this. I've dealt with selling to schools and to prisons, and the fact of the matter is that prisoners in California have to be given grade A food, and California schools have the option of buying A, B, C, or D grade, which I think is outrageous that our children are put in this secondary position for affordability, right? It has to be grade A so it prevents prison riots, but for the kids, they can just have garbage, whatever is affordable, it's insane to me that we're in that. I mean, we've pioneered at Zacky Farms, we pioneered antibiotic-free in our poultry. We know that it's doable to make healthy, wholesome food, especially available for kids. And when you're putting the value of money over the children, that's a serious issue. Our kids should be able to have quality food because we produce it here in California. And when Newsom does things like putting a 10-year ban into effect for till 2035, I mean, getting into office, we can stop that. We can repeal that. And on top of that, I have the line veto item. So anything coming forward, I can strike down the bad things. And then we can start pilot programs that can help schools get in touch with these local farms, local communities to help immediately kickstart that. And then also provide compensation for those schools that do that to help offset those expenses to get it rolling and off the ground so we can get healthy food for our kids as quickly as possible.
Yeah, we'll throw it over to you, finally as well, Lewis Herms.
Sure. I hope you can hear the rain in the background. It's just absolutely beautiful. Now, what we need to know is delay is a payoff. It's a political payoff. So when government entities and politicians delay something on the backs of our children's health, that's a payoff. So one of the things we're going to do that I think is very powerful is we're already working on a website that we will upload when we're in office called exposure.ca.gov. When there is some legislation that goes through, or there is a legislator that clearly votes against what the public interest is, or if there's a judge, a judicial activist that goes against what the public interest is, we are going to put them on a public site, exposure.ca.gov, so people know exactly who they're dealing with. They're going to know the name, the email, they can send them letters, go outside their office, protest, whatever they need to do. It's very, very important. But to go at this issue really, really heavily, it's important. We must know these ultra-processed foods, they're laden with synthetic materials, and it's just the worst for the children. But there's also something else that I'd like to just discuss real quickly. The use of hand sanitizers in school, which, by the way, is pervasive after COVID, is decimating our children's microbiome. It's destroying their immune system. So I'm going to do everything I can with executive orders, dollars, whatever it takes to make sure our children have the healthiest possible food and have the best way having their immune system do the work for them as God is intended.
Yeah. Our next question comes from Dr. Michelle Perro, who's a medical doctor and CEO of GMO Sciences, and it deals with glyphosate, pesticides, and what kind of agriculture California is going to stand behind. California feeds the country, producing roughly half of Americans' fruits, vegetables, and nuts, and yet much of that food is still grown with glyphosate, even though it is listed under California's own Proposition 65 as a carcinogen. A federal jury here in California found that Monsanto knew the risks and failed to warn users, and that verdict held up on appeal. At the same time, PFAS chemicals are showing up in the soil, water, and even the blood of farm workers in rural communities, while taxpayer dollars continue flowing to farms that still rely on these chemical systems, including some marketed as regenerative because apparently labels are easier to manage than consequences. With all that in mind, with renewed attention to glyphosate at the federal level, here is Dr. Pero.
Hello, my name is Dr. Michelle Pero, and I am co-founder and CEO of GMOscience.org, a nonprofit, and author of What's Making Our Children Sick and Making Our Children Well. Here's my question. President Trump's recent executive order granting glyphosate a national defense exemption appears to further entrench its use at the expense of public health. Given the overwhelming independent evidence linking glyphosate exposure to microbiome disruption, endocrine damage, and neurodevelopmental disorders, how will the governor address this contradiction and ensure that agricultural chemical policy aligns with the broader goal of restoring true health freedom and disease prevention in America's children? Thank you.
So we'll throw this over to Leo first, but Dr. Pero's question gets to whether California is willing to stop tolerating and subsidizing a chemical-heavy food system that puts farm workers, families, and consumers at risk, and instead support farming methods that build healthy soil, avoid synthetic herbicides, and are already proving they can work at scale.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the importance of a living soil, all the microbiome that's in there that makes the ability to be able to grow these healthy, nutrient-rich foods is paramount. I mean, I'm absolutely disappointed in President Trump with what he's done with this, exemption for glyphosate. I mean, it's clearly a financial driven, thing, because obviously businesses, these farms, these mega corporations that now are taking over the space because we are seeing the destruction of the small independent farmer, especially here in California, that it's all very much profit driven. I mean, glyphosate is made by Monsanto, which is now owned by Bayer, which is a huge mega corporation, right? So, and they also produce a lot of other pharmaceutical goods out there, right? So I think there's a lot of crossover in that regard. But here in California, we can do away with it. But again, we have to be able to have the water abundance for our farmers so they don't have that reliance. And when we can start limiting and removing those needs and those dependencies because we have the need for water and we can grow in excess, then farmers don't have to worry about maintaining a small, limited amount of crops that will be available to make it to market, because it's so cutthroat out here. If your crop, if you aren't able to fulfill X amount of your crop, then you could go under and you'll lose your entire farm, and then it just gets aggregated into the megacorp farm system that we're seeing take over right now. And when they use those studies about linking it to cancer and stuff like that, it's definitely from consumption, but the government studies that they're looking at are just from physical exposure to people, like farm workers that are constantly handling barrels of this stuff and spraying it and inhaling it. But we do know that it is confirmed that when it is sprayed on food, it stays in the food. Just because you wash it off doesn't take it away. It still gets consumed, and then those carcinogens enter your body. And if that's what we're sustaining ourselves on, then there's no wonder that we're rife with cancer in this country. So we will put a stop to it.
Yeah, and Lewis, we'll go and throw it over to you.
Yeah, first, I was actually pretty triggered when President Trump signed that protection for the companies in glyphosate. And then I listened to Kennedy's explanation, Secretary Kennedy. It's not that it's not going to happen. It's that we are so heavily dependent on GMO crops, glyphosate-based pesticides, that he believes that it would have completely destroyed our food supplies if we did it that quickly. Now, I believe that it is extremely important to get rid of glyphosate and everything else that is dangerous to us. So I would do everything I can, including writing an EO in regards to that. So what we need to know, though, is what's important is we have to do regenerative farming. We have to rotate our crops, which gives us a chance to remineralize, which is the best healthy eating that we can. And we don't need to use all these pesticides. Funny enough, I got some heat with my first debate with Hilton and some other people because I mentioned something. Now they find out it's true. I've traveled the worldwide and I've spoken to people that they're actually using copper to surround their farms and singing to their crops and getting up to 250% production. Why am I saying this? Is we need to be open enough to explore any alternative that can give us the healthiest food on the planet. And lastly, I'll leave you with this, and this is a concern. Somebody mentioned Bayer. Bayer owns Monsanto. Monsanto creates products that we know have challenges to our health. Yet, if you go and research the solution, Bayer happens to sell you the solution for the same products that they created. Problem solution. That's a concern.
Yeah, and Sheriff Bianco, we'll throw it over to you now. It looks like you're muted there.
Sorry, and you told us not to do that. So we're finding that President Trump is making repeated bad decisions. And this is an example of one of those. Everyone knows that this is a horrific decision, the way they did it. And I also understand Secretary Kennedy's answer to that. But the bottom line is everything about our food system has been controlled. And Lewis kind of alluded to it. I think he was a little bit too nice in the whole thing. Everything is working together for money with the pharmaceuticals and our food supply. They own everything. And when we get to the realization that, and we start educating people of that, that's when we're going to fix it. And the whole thing with GMOs, we have to get to a place in California where, and I'm with Lewis, I'm not about the incentivizing, but we have to incentivize our farmers for not only the non-pesticide, but for the non-GMO. And we have to get to a point where we're making healthy food outside this industrial complex that's been created by government to keep these people mega rich at our expense. We make them rich on the food that they produce, and then we make them rich because we have to take their medicine because of the food that we consumed. All of this has to stop. We can stop it in California because California is unique across the entire country, and that we can be independent with our food here in California. We are the only state in the country that can do it, and we absolutely must move towards something like that while we stop this overzealous and this over ridiculous attempt to make sure that we're basically, they own us. They are forcing us to do all of this, and it is to our health expense, and we have to take it back. And as the governor, you can actually absolutely do that.
And Steve Hilton, your response.
Yeah, we've got to do this with our farmers, though. That's the most important point. Leo got that right in terms of the structure of the industry. The family farms are being driven out. The cost structure is a nightmare. Farms are either going out of business or being bought up, and all the issues that drive that are part of the reason that you get this industrialization, which I'm dead against and always have been. But we are, we've got to keep our industry here in California. We cannot lose any more farming. And so we have to sit, this is what I do the whole time when I'm there with our farmers and say, I raise the pesticide issue all the time because it's a massive concern to all of us here, everyone watching, and so many people across not just our state, but across the country, and say, well, what are we going to do about this? And many of them do want to do something about it, and many of them are. They don't want to use as much. That's a cost, for example. And so we've got to figure out a way to make sure we get to where we want to be in terms of reducing these chemicals and eliminating the ones that we don't want to see anything of, but without killing our ag industry and driving it just offshore down to Mexico or to another state where they don't give a crap about any of this, and it won't make any difference in the end to the food that we all eat because it's just going to be coming from somewhere else cheaper, and that is not what I want to see. We've got to keep our ag industry in California thriving and growing rather than crushing it. And so this is definitely something where we have to sit down together. And my role as governor will be to bring people together and say, right, how are we going to fix this together?
Yeah, now our next question comes from Michael Maxenti, who's a congressional candidate in California's 47th district, and he goes straight at the issue of big pharma influence and political corruption in the state. Governor Newsom has received more than $58 million in financial support from the healthcare and managed care sector, including roughly $23 million connected to Blue Shield and nearly $35 million from Kaiser Permanente through behested payments, which is one of those wonderfully convenient California arrangements where money goes exactly where a politician asks, and somehow we're all supposed to pretend that means nothing. Meanwhile, some of those same players went on to receive major no-bid state contracts tied to COVID testing and vaccine distribution. Critics have called it pay to play, and not without reason. When vendors can give enough money through a legal loophole and then walk away with massive state contracts, the public has every right to ask who government is really serving. Here is Michael Maxenti.
Thank you all for stepping into the arena. I'm doing the same as a candidate for Congress in Orange County here, California District 47. I'm deeply committed to making America healthy again, and I'm proud to have worked alongside many of the people who have helped put this evening together. Remember, a vote for Maxenti is a vote for Maha. My question to each of you is the following. Californians are paying more and getting sicker, and many believe that's driven by a system influenced by powerful health care and pharmaceutical industries. As governor, what would each of you actually do to break that influence and make the system accountable to the health of the people? I look forward to your answers. Thank you so much.
Now, Michael's question, which we'll throw to Steve first, gets to whether California is willing to confront the corrupting influence of pharmaceutical and healthcare money in politics, close the loopholes that make this pay-to-play system possible, and restore public trust by proving that state policy is not being shaped by the same interests cashing in on it.
Yeah, behested payments is just legalized corruption. It's completely unacceptable. When I first heard about it, I couldn't believe it. And you see it's rampant in our system, and Newsom abuses it and directing money from companies that he regulates to his wife's charities and all this stuff. It's just completely unacceptable, and that has to just be stopped. I mean, that's it. It's unacceptable. The same goes for the conflict of interest, where you see people making decisions and legislators making decisions over questions where they're completely corrupted by donations from those interests. I mean, of course, you see it right across the board. You see the teacher unions totally driving policy when it comes to their interest by owning the legislatures, but it's just as true of corporate interests. It's just as true in Sacramento. So what I would like to see is an end to what I call conflict donations, where you have, if you've got a donation from an organization, a business, or whatever it may be, that you're then making a decision on legislatively, you should have to recuse yourself. We'd soon see those payments stop. They wouldn't be able to do anything, because basically everything they do is completely bought. I mean, they call it the third house. You've got the Assembly, the Senate, and people call it the third house, which is the corporate interests. I mean, this is not how it is supposed to work. And we've got to really bring a lot of attention to it. That's the starting point to ending it. I don't think people realize how totally corrupt the system is in Sacramento. And it's one of the things that's a function of all these 16 years of one-party rule, where they just, get away with this forever. And they think there'll be no accountability. It's our job to shine a spotlight on it. Of course, healthcare is a huge one. It's one of the biggest categories of donors to Gavin Newsom. You saw the French Laundry dinner. He was there with the medical industry lobbyist. I mean, that's how it works. It's a scandal, and we've got to expose it and then stop it.
Yeah, Leo Zacky, we'll throw it over to you.
I mean, it's very plain to see that Sacramento's health agencies, the public health agencies, have all been corrupted and captured by this corrupt corporate and globalist agenda. And so as governor, I can appoint new directors and heads of these positions to replace the rubber stampers that have been putting the Newsom agenda and the globalist agenda into place. We can get actually good people in there that will be accountable to families and not to big pharma. People that actually want to do the right thing, that have actual understanding and real world experience and know the consequences of their actions, and will be able to be held accountable for the decisions that are made while they're in those positions. It's the lack of accountability, and it's also the lack of consequences that is allowing this to be so rife throughout every aspect of our government. And when we actually have people that are willing to draw the line in the sand and say, that's it, we're not playing this anymore, we're going to do what's right by the people, and also make transparency thing that's accessible to everybody. I mean, part of the plan here is to redo the state website so anybody can go and interact with an intelligent like LLM, like an AI, a Grok or whatever, and ask these questions and get answers on how it's going on in, what are the policies and how it's written in plain English. No legalese, no nonsense that's, draped in blah blah blah. It has to be plain simple English for people to understand so they can see what's going on and then know who's responsible for putting those into play, and then how they can communicate and interact with them to say, hey, this isn't good. We need to be able to address our grievances, and this is the direction we'd like to see it go. So that public forum is going to be huge, but the accountability and making sure that there are good, honest people that aren't paid to play, that weren't like installed by some lobbying organization or, the revolving door of, politicians and C-suite executives in big pharma. That's how we're going to be able to ensure that the health and safety is there. And we know that there's issues, but you have to have people with a conscience and a sound mind that want to do the right thing for everybody. And that's what I'm here to do. Bring those people into these positions. And MAHA is full of great people that will be ready to do the job. I'm looking forward to working with them.
And Lewis Herms, your response.
Education, education, education. We don't know what we don't know right now. And the reality is a lot of this started intentionally. I call it the Rockefeller realm, where they built these protocols in order to control and maximize their profits. I'm going to give you an example. So we have an annual annual big pharma spending on advertisement of $25 billion. Now, my question to you is, if a product works, it goes viral. You don't need to spend $25 billion on it. And it's because it's the only way they can get profit, by paying off lobbyists, by paying off doctors. It's scandalous. 85% or more of all of our health conditions are either environmental or food. Yet less than 3% of all the education that a doctor has is on environmental or food. There's the big problem right there. We need to explore alternatives. There's real alternatives that work. I can tell you, I've investigated a healthcare facility that has 8 cancer treatment centers, and they have a 3,500% better rate than your standard protocols in the United States, but nobody wants to talk about them, right? So it's preventative care, not symptom care. And we must remove the liability shield that the pharmaceutical companies have and look towards new things like there's frequency healing. Go figure. There's PMF healing. There's Scalar. There's Skylar. There's a lot of things. Glutathione is one of the best products on this earth to help heal because it works on your mitochondria. Your mitochondria sends a signal to your system to heal itself. But you will not have doctors talk about that very much because they're not trained in it, and it does not fill the pockets of the evildoers.
And Sheriff Bianco, your response to this question.
Yeah, so this is also one of those that can go on for years of us talking about it. We're all on the same page, though. So the answer is not only education, but it's transparency, and it's making sure that we are transparent of what our government is doing. We absolutely know that they are accepting bribes, accepting special trips, all of these things. And I'm going to tell you, I hope you all know that law enforcement is one of the most regulated, lack of transparent industries that we possibly have. And it's the only industry, and it's government. And I believe I'm going to make this all of government, because in the law enforcement world, we are the only industry that you can be fired for ethical and moral decisions that you make, not only at work, but in your private life. And so why are we not holding the lawmakers accountable for the same thing? When we find them, because we all know it's there, we all know it's happening, and they are taking the kickbacks from the pharmaceutical industry, the kickbacks from the medical industry, and they are making these decisions, how Lewis said, $25 billion, obviously it's a bad product, and they're just trying to sell you because they're going to make $100 billion on the back end. It obviously isn't something good, and those lawmakers are passing those laws, regulations, and all of those things that make that happen. We must get to a point where Leo's mentioned this about replacing the head of something. We can every single one of Newsom's appointments have to be replaced because they have proven that they are not in that position to help us. They are helping industry. They are helping the medical industry. They are helping the pharmaceutical industry, the electric industry, all of those things. And it's not about California. When you put a governor in a position to make sure that everyone is held accountable for ethical and moral decisions, or you're removed, that's how we fix California.
Yeah, now our next question comes from John Warden, who's a founder and chairman of LifeAid, and it focuses on community health and well-being through the lens of people who carry some of the heaviest burdens in the state. California is home to roughly 1.4 million veterans and tens of thousands of first responders, and both groups face elevated rates of PTSD, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and suicide. Among veterans and the suicide rate is dramatically higher than the general population. Among first responders, nearly a third develop behavioral health conditions, and for many, especially firefighters dealing with repeated wildfire trauma, burnout and psychological strain have become part of the job description, which is a darkly efficient way to run a society. Even worse, many still do not seek help because of stigma, confidentiality concerns, wait times, and treatment gaps. Here is John Warden.
Hi, my name is John Warden, a resident of LA County. I've been involved in military, veteran, and first responder resilience and readiness for the past 17 years. According to the NIH and CDC data, California is home to the second largest veteran population in the country. We face a significant crisis regarding veteran and first responder suicide and mental health, with suicide rates among veterans and first responders notably higher than the state's general population, exceeding in the line of duty deaths. Despite this high mental health need, a UCLA study found that 46% of our veterans do not receive adequate mental health care. Where did we go wrong, and what are you going to do to fix it?
So Sheriff Bianco, we'll start with you. And what concrete steps would you take to expand mental health, addiction recovery, and community support resources for veterans and first responders? And how would you break through the barriers that keep so many from getting help before the damage becomes irreversible?
And this is one of those things where, do you want someone that talks about it or someone that's already done it? And being in the first responder realm, and especially a leader of law enforcement, we know that this is one of our biggest drivers with PTSD and suicides and all of those things that are harming our workers. And that stigma is huge. So a leader removes that stigma by making sure that the people that it affects have the ability to not only get the treatment, but also there's the stigma is just that there's going to be some type of a consequence, whether it be embarrassment or whether it be job action or something like that. And when people will know that that is no longer there, that's no longer real, that's not a reality, they are more than willing to go for that. So in my agency, we went from zero mental health issues or care for our deputies to, with me, we have 100% mental health care, and for not only our employee, but for their kids and their spouse, because we also know that the trauma that they take home from the PTSD also affects their spouse and their children. So we have made sure that our entire department and their spouses get the health care that they need. But it goes further than that. It's not only with our first responders and our military. It's not just the PTSD that they are suffering. It's their ability physically to not be able to deal with it outside of medications. We don't need the psychedelics. We don't need all of those things. What we need is a whole system approach to making them healthy. And that includes not only physical exercise, physical training, but mental health care, and it all goes back to food. We are able to manage our mental health systems of our body by the intake of food and what we are putting into it. And we are realizing that whether it's bad food or cigarettes or tobacco or alcohol or drugs, that is creating the system that we're in also, as our employees and our military personnel are trying to deal with that trauma. We absolutely must start caring about them. We absolutely, and it's a small percentage of people. Law enforcement and our first responders are not a big area of the population, and they are the ones that need the help to make sure, because of the trauma, the help that they need to make sure we stop this unbelievable cycle of suicides in both of those two industries.
Yeah, Leo, Zacky, your response.
Well, there's a lot of things that we can do to help our veterans, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a pharmaceutical thing. Like there are so many things out there that are in the holistic realm that can help people deal with things like this. I know psychedelics is something that is proven to help get rid of, post-traumatic stress disorder and help people through their mental illness situations. I've seen it work with war veterans, but we also have to be able to provide an environment where our firefighters aren't having to deal with constant fires under the stress. We have to be able to build an environment where we're not dealing with these constant fires and be proactive as opposed to reactive when it comes to forest management, to be able to limit the need for all that. But when it comes to people in the first responder situation that were fired for not taking the clot shots, the experimental drugs during the COVID scamdemic, my friend Katie Hamlin, she was fired because she refused to take that. She was working in an ER. She was fantastic at what she did, but she lost her job because of that. So we need to be able to fast track reinstatement to get these people that held true to their own fruition and their own bodily autonomy and said no to those shots, be able to get them quickly reinstated back into the workforce, because we need great people. We need to have free thinkers in these spaces that can help provide better care for all the Californians out there. So making that available to them is going to be absolutely paramount. But we also have to focus again on emphasizing non-pharmaceutical care. There are great strides that are taking place in this holistic medicine field, but it's not getting the notoriety that it deserves because there's no profit in it for the big pharma, right? Because if they can't put a patent on it, then they can't control it and they can't enrich themselves off of our ailments. Red light works, like Lewis has been saying about, different frequencies. There's, hyperbaric, all sorts of different methods that can help people recover and get past this stuff. And when we put an emphasis on mental health, then we're also going to see a drastic decline in the homeless population as well. And part of my Homeless to Home program has a very structured living environment where mental health care is provided for them while they're going through the process of rehabilitation, but also getting a job skill. So it's constructive in that regard. I mean, it's multi-layered in the approach that I'm coming forward with as governor. And it's all things that can be very easily implemented. It's just, do you have somebody that understands the wide breadth of this situation and the opportunities and solutions that exist out there that probably don't get the attention that they deserve? One of the companies that I have is called Phytotech, for example. We do protein replication, and we're promoting healthier food options by taking stem cells and allowing them to replicate without being exposed to poisons in the environment, things that can produce natural remedies for illness, different herbs, for example. And we're able to do this, but we're pioneering that technology here in California so we can make it affordable and available to everybody.
Yeah, now let's throw it over to you, Steve Hilton, with your response.
So Leo's right about the lamentable state of mental health provision just generally in our state, and that needs to improve. And I've been laying out my plans to do that for throughout the campaign. But I just want to hit the firefighter point and then the veterans. On firefighting, there's one important thing that we can do to keep people healthier in the first place and minimize the harm, and that is to really update how we do firefighting. If you look at what's going on in terms of innovation and technology around the world, particularly in Asia, particularly with China and Japan, we are just nowhere on that stuff. And we're using techniques that put people in danger in direct context that can just be completely removed if we did it like some other countries do. We're supposed to be the technology capital of the world, but when it comes to that particular era of firefighting, we are absolutely like in the dark ages. So that's something specific that we can change there. With veterans, I think it's a good example of how I see this job as governor. You don't do everything yourself. Like all my years in, whether it's in business or anything else, you only get things done to the extent that you find great people, great teams, and you put them in place and give them a clear direction and hold them accountable for that. So when it comes to veterans, I've been working with retired Major General Eldon Regwa, who is putting in place our plans to completely transform how we take care of veterans in this state. We've already started with the first set of plans focusing on the financial aspect. We're going to be removing our veterans from property tax and income tax on their retirement, that as many other states do. And there's more to come. And this is how I see it. We're going to put people in charge of our Veterans Department and the whole system who are veterans, who understand, because they're in touch with the veterans community all the time and hear all the issues that you're talking about. And I've heard it directly from veterans as well. And we're going to completely change the way we take care of them in California. It's our obligation to do that after they've done so much for us.
Yeah, and Louis Herms, your thoughts?
Well, as a father of 3 vets, this is near and dear to my heart. I have 3 veterans, 2 Marines, 1 airman, and I've had these long conversations with them. One of the biggest challenges that I would say are out there is lack of accelerated access. We must have accelerated access to the systems that can help prevent suicide, depression, PTSD. I heard talk about food. Yes, food and exercise are paramount. Well, there's also been proof that animal rehab seems to work. There's certain mind exercises that can be done. Red light therapy that was mentioned here. Now, I frankly, though, I wouldn't throw away ibogaine or maybe a microdosing of psilocybin. I wouldn't throw that away. I would investigate that. In fact, I know President Trump just signed an executive order to investigate some of this stuff. And I'm saying that from somebody that is never been a drug user or I don't even drink alcohol. But I do believe that there are alternative methods to heal these people. And I have studied a little bit about ibogaine and have some counsel on this, and they seem to be getting some good results. So there could be some negative aspects to it that I'll look at also, but that including food, but access to the right services immediately is paramount to solving this system. Bureaucracy cannot stand in the way of taking care of our vets and taking care of our first responders. They are what keep us alive.
Yeah, now our next question was submitted anonymously from a We the People team volunteer, and it deals with geoengineering, transparency, and whether California is willing to put clear limits on atmospheric intervention. According to the California Department of Water Resources, cloud seeding has been operational in this state since the late 1950s, with millions already being spent annually on weather modification and far larger investments contemplated over the next several decades. The state's own planning documents reference the use of silver iodide, dry ice, and at times other agents and supplemental seeding materials. For a lot of Californians, the concern is not theoretical. It is that these programs are happening with very little public awareness, limited real-world testing, uncertain long-term effects, and not nearly enough transparency for activities that directly affect their air, water, and environment people live in. Other states have already begun drawing harder lines. So here's the question. Part 1, many Californians are concerned about potential exposure to airborne particles from proposed geoengineering of stratospheric aerosol injection. What is your position on banning or restricting these activities in order to protect public health? And part 2, as of early this year, Tennessee and Florida have passed laws banning intentional geoengineering and atmospheric modifications such as cloud seeding and solar radiation management. These laws aim to protect environmental and human health from potential risks, with Florida's Senate Bill 56 in 2025, which implements a ban that makes such activities a third-degree felony. Over 30 states have introduced proposed similar legislation to limited or restrict these activities and or increase transparency. Would you support similar legislation here in California? And we'll go ahead and start with you, Louis.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. In fact, I believe it's 37 states have implemented or are trying to implement laws to prevent this. I think it's fascinating that when I was a child, I would lay on the grass, look up at the beautiful clouds, and create animal characters out of it. And now if I were to do that, I could play tic-tac-toe. Yet there's still people that saying geoengineering does not exist. Well, folks, if 37 states are looking to outlaw it, if Lee Zeldin actually is doing a full investigation in this, folks, I think it exists, and it does. I've been studying this for a long time. I was called a conspiracy theorist when I did videos and documentaries on this 6 years ago. There's barium, there's aluminum, there's strontium that are in there. The monarch butterflies in some places are down 75%. The bee population is down 50%. No bees, we don't survive. This is an epic issue. and we need to be on top of it as much as we possibly can. And I'm going to go as far as saying, not only will I ban it, I will, as the commander-in-chief of California, you have access to the Air National Guard. I will send the Air National Guard up with F-16s to bring a plane down so we can have a full investigation with that pilot and investigate that plane to see what's going on. Unless they can prove that this is for our true health, there will be heavy consequences for this. This is a real issue, and we can't pretend it's not anymore.
Yeah, Leo Zacky, your response.
Well, it's a damn good thing that Tennessee and Florida have done that, and other states are looking into it. I mean, it's no secret that these chemicals are in there, but they're also salting the earth. They're poisoning the soil. They're killing that that healthy living soil that we so desperately need to provide that healthy food. And it's putting all these chemicals into the air that we're breathing into our lungs and we're taking in, and it's just poison. There's no doubt about it. This is all very real. And, when I, meet with people like, Palmer Luckey, who's, running up Andrill, right? And he's all about cloud seeding. I'm just like, this is concerning. Why are we messing with nature? Like, do not F with Mother Nature, because the consequences are always vast and unforeseen. We can cultivate the water and that we need here in California. We could capture it by just investing in infrastructure, making smart decisions, building out the irrigation that we need to provide the water for the farms, where we don't need to do this cloud seeding. We don't need to do it anyways, but we're doing it because there is a financial incentive attached to it. And when you have health side effects that stem from it, from the same companies that are making these chemicals that are getting out into the air, that we're breathing, that we're ingesting, that they're then turning around and selling us the cure, it's all cyclical, and it's by design to kill us and keep us down. There is a real concern for health when it comes to what's going on and what's coming out of the exhaust of airplanes, or if it's just being intentionally sprayed up there. There's a difference between a condensation trail and a chemtrail. Condensation trails evaporate relatively quickly. Chemtrails persist for a very long time, and you'll see clouds and weather patterns change because of it. So it's no secret to that. It's conversations like this and talking about, the health of people's well-being and their own choice. And when you have people spraying stuff in the air, you don't have that bodily autonomy. These are the conversations that, are the reason why people like Dr. Robert Malone have endorsed me, because I see the whole spectrum of what's going on, and being able to outlaw this and stop this is paramount for health, for everybody, but also for our food security and being able to thrive as a people. We should not be messing with Mother Nature in that regard.
Sheriff Bianco, how would you deal with this issue?
Very similar to the others, although we have to also be realistic. There's nothing that a governor can do about cloud seeding and about what we are seeing with chemtrails. Federal airspace starts at 1,200 feet. We can't control those planes that are up there. The federal government has to do that. The federal government has to stop it. Yes, I agree with Florida and the other states that have come up with regulations or rules that ban it, but it's theater in nature because they can't actually stop it. If they could, they would no longer exist in Florida, and yet they do, because the federal government controls the federal airspace, and we have to start being louder about what's happening. But the reality is, talking about the cloud seeding and everything else, this is the hypocrisy that it really isn't about water, and it's not about weather manipulation in California, because even if we got more rain, all of our rainwater or our snowpack is directed out to the ocean anyway. This is not about water. It's not about that. This is the arrogance. It's a combination of the arrogance of government trying to believe that we can control the earth and the temperature of the earth when we can't. No one has ever denied that climate change was there, because it always has been. All throughout history, there is scientific evidence of climate change, but is not caused by the human population. It's the arrogance of humans and then the control that humans want to make money that we are venturing into these paths of green and solar and all of these things, renewables and all of this garbage that is all about a money grab. We have to get to a point where we're being honest. Government is not being honest. As a governor, I can promise that we will be more transparent and honest than at ever time in our history. But we have to get to the realization that if we have scientists that are saying that these chemicals are dangerous and cause cancer, why are we putting them in the sky to fall down upon our crops, to fall down upon us as we're just out and about? There is a much more sinister thing than what we believe, and we just have to realize that we have to start taking control of our health. We have to start caring about the health of our kids, the future of California, and California has to be first outside of the U.S.
Yeah. Now, Steve Hilton, what's your response?
So this is another example of where we've just had years and years and years of people just being told, don't believe your lying eyes, and just being blown off by the experts and said, and told that they're conspiracy theorists, just as we were discussing earlier in relation to a few of the other topics. And it's got to stop. And we've got to treat people like adults, and other states are doing it, and we're not in California. And so the first step has to be, I mean, the word's been mentioned a lot, and a real investigation. So I haven't seen anything coming out of Lee Zeldin. We got to do that here. I mean, you hear you all over the state, you see reports of planes taking off from here. In Orange County, you hear that all the time, and up and down the state, and doing this stuff. So what is going on? Who's paying for it? What's the purpose? What's happening? We've got to be told. So step one is an independent investigation that's fast. We don't need to drag on for years and years and years. We need to understand what's going on, and then we will understand what is the relationship between stuff that may be coming out of California and paid for by state agencies and so on versus federal. And when it comes to federal, I would say this is another example of where I think it's helpful to have a governor who has good working relationships with people leading some of these departments and agencies in the federal government, whether that's Lee Zeldin, who I know well, or Sean Duffy, Transportation Secretary, who I know well. I think we got to get on with it and be assertive about our right here in California to decide how we live and what our people are exposed to.
Yeah. Now, our last question of the town hall comes from Dory Dutton, a volunteer for the Wetlands and Wildlife Care Center in Huntington Beach, and it addresses an issue Californians are living with in real time: environmental toxicity that is no longer isolated to one region or one source. Across the state, we are dealing with pesticide runoff, nitrates in groundwater, PFAS contamination, wildfire ash and debris, VOCs and heavy metals, sewage spills, and polluted stormwater moving through watersheds that serve both people and ecosystems. In Southern California alone, communities are dealing with the cross-border sewage crisis in San Diego County, toxic runoff that has shut down beaches for years, and contamination from places like Santa Susana Field Lab, and that continues threatening surrounding waterways every time it rains. So Dory Dutton asks, as governor, how would you prioritize funding and policy changes to strengthen water system resilience, ensure faster response and improve maximum containment level for both large urban and small rural systems, protect municipal and designated supply sources, and better integrate recycled water and stormwater while safeguarding public health and ecosystems? And we'll go ahead and start with you, Leo Zacky.
Well, there's a lot that can be done with water. And when it comes to making sure that the health of everybody who's out there is being protected, it's again, the people that are in charge, the board members of the water board and the Cal EPA. Those are people that the governor can appoint. Those are all people that need to be implemented, that are of the same mindset and want to do the right thing for people, protecting the environments, not from a fanciful standpoint, but from a legitimate, these have dire consequences. How can we limit and do away with the poisons that are entering the system? When here in Los Angeles, the cleanup has been unbelievably slow when it comes to getting all the fire debris cleaned up, and we keep having rains and it keeps washing out to the sea, and now we have this toxic island, it's floating off the coast, and I don't dare go in the water because it's not safe. And we're not preventing the wildfires. We're not being efficient in our cleanup. We're not making sure that there are protocols in place. We have a lot of water that falls on California every year, but we don't capture it, whether it comes in the form of snowpack, whether it comes in the form of rainfall. We're not utilizing it. We're not harnessing it. We need to build dams. We need to build reservoirs. We need to not be having things like the Madeira bypass shuttling all this water out to the sea that we could actually use and inject into the groundwater to raise the water tables, to store in the aquifers, or just to direct it to farm use or into other newly built reservoirs that are in place. Things like fluoride being put into the water. I mean, these are mandated. So as long as the government is funding it, and as governor, I can control the budget, we can stop the funding so it stops poisoning the water. It's a known neurotoxin. It's already been discussed and deliberated upon. That needs to stop going in there. There's just a whole host of things that we can do. But again, it's about having people that understand the real brevity of the situation and the depth and all the extreme circumstances and fallout from it that need to be installed in these positions that can do the right thing for people. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to work with great people who have this understanding that can make sure that we have healthy environment for everybody, not just the people, but for the places that we live and enjoy.
And Steve Hilton, your response.
So this is just one of those examples of how insane things have gotten in California. We have so much environmental regulation of one kind or another. You've got all these agencies, you've got CARB, you've got pesticide regulation, you've got State Water Resources Control Board, you've got endless bureaucracies, so, massively consuming more of our taxpayer money, and a bunch of it is going into fraud, as we've seen, and they're imposing all these costs and hassle and headache and giving us the worst business climate in the country. So all of this sprawling regulation, particularly in the area of the environment, and yet people feel like the environment is actually getting worse and we're not being protected. And one of the main reasons is the whole obsession of the Democrats who've been in charge with one tiny aspect of all of this, which is not a holistic sense of our world and our ecosystems and nature, but just a narrow focus on carbon dioxide emissions, CO2 emissions, and climate change. That's all they focus on. And so the answer to this is actually to kick out the climate fanatics from all these agencies, wherever possible, to shut them down and scale them back and avoid this, get rid of this massive overregulation. But then the people you put in there have to be common sense people who understand nature, who love nature, who understand all the different aspects of life in California, our rural areas, urban areas, all these things. And you again, it's not the government can't do everything on their own. It's about getting the good people in there, kicking out the bad ones and putting in the good ones who have common sense and will put our communities first. And that's what I'll do as governor.
And Sheriff Bianco, your response.
Yeah, I would be willing to say that that all four of us would consider ourselves, if we really got down to it, environmentalists, and that we care about our environment, we care about the earth, we care about California. But there's a massive, massive difference between environmental activist and someone that cares about the environment. And what we have in California is a complete system that is ruled by environmental activists that I actually describe as domestic terrorists. And everything that they are about is preventing growth in California, preventing progress in California, and just really using the court system, the regulatory system, and their appointments that the governor usually makes to all of these boards and commissions to make sure that their agenda is furthered. And we have to realize that it is all fake. If they actually cared about the environment, they would be doing something about the Palisades. They would be doing something about the massive amounts of industrial waste and sewer that's coming in from Mexico into San Diego that is basically polluting every beach in San Diego, harming our military base with military members getting sick. And it shows that it's completely hypocritical and false into a system that is broken in California because of environmental domestic terrorist activism. And all of that has to be removed. We have to get to a place where we realize that it is common sense on how you deal with our water issue. We have a government control of our water. We don't have a water issue. We've never had a water issue in California. We have to build massive amounts of reservoirs and dams. When you do that and you supply the farming community with 100% of the water they need, we no longer need the pesticides. We no longer need all of these things. You let our ranching community go. So we have regenerative farming. We have the environment building its way naturally. We don't get into doctors and educational people telling us how to operate, because farmers and ranchers know how to best manage their industry more so than anyone else, or they would go out of business. Their livelihoods would be stopped. The water issue is easy. Build the reservoirs and dams, 100% of the water to our farmers. When that happens, the aquifers naturally fill. We fill those things up, but then we cannot ignore any longer that we have water from Mexico all the way to Oregon. We have to build desalination plants to. Very good. I'll end there.
Now, yeah, we'll go ahead and throw it over to Louis Herms for your thoughts.
Sure. So I think, again, this comes down to education. We have to understand the big global warming climate change hoax. When I was younger, it was the coming ice age, and then it was global warming. And because neither of that stuff worked out, now it's just climate change. All in all, while you have Al Gore and some of the Hollywood types that have been pushing this agenda, flying their jets across the planet, spewing more carbon than you could possibly imagine any human could do within a lifetime. but it's the hidden hand trick. So we're all focusing on something that is unseen that we have to repair, when there's a lot of things that we can repair right now. How about something nobody talks about? There's a great Pacific garbage patch. It's twice the size of Texas in the Pacific Ocean. Just plastics and microplastics just polluting the ocean. And guess what? There are solid solutions for that. Twice the size of Texas. But there's great solutions. I've investigated a system where we can actually take the landfills, convert them into energy for 60% less than we're paying right now, with a 97.5% reduction from the landfill itself, even puts out potable water, and it puts out a fantastic fertilizer. There's SMR technology, small modular reactors that we can put underground and use the existing grid. We must create clean water protocols. It's imperative, but we also must be able to randomly access and test them. Fluoride is real, yes. Deuterium is something I mentioned that we have to look into. You guys go educate yourself on deuterium, but massive testing is important. Now, to solve the water problem, there's several ideas that I heard here. I've also talked to a gentleman, Richard Lee, that has proposed something amazing. It's called Lake Ottacelli, and it's amazing how much water that we can capture in California that will feed the rest of California for pennies on the dollar, and we won't have to access the Colorado River, which means we can get the states in a country that use the Colorado River to help us finance that project. So there are great solutions. Appreciate that.
Yeah, well, and I just want to say, in closing as well, I appreciate each and every one of you guys for joining us and being a part of this. And we just intentionally wanted to set this up as a town hall to where we could just hear your guys' thoughts. And I appreciate all the detail that each of you guys went into. I want to close out, and I'll give you guys each 60 seconds, and we'll go around the horn. We'll go in alphabetical order to make it as fair as we possibly can. But I want to hear your guys' pitch to everybody that's watching this on why they should vote for you for governor, and if they do want to get involved or support you, how they can do that. Let's start with you, Sheriff Bianco. Oh, you're muted right now.
Yeah, thank you. I completely understand where California is absolutely sick of government. And not only are we sick of government, we're sick of politicians, we're sick of the dishonesty, we're sick of the lies, and we're sick of the what we know is the corruption and the money that's going behind all of these things, not only in the homeless and the medical and all of those things, but in our health. And we have to start, what is more important than our health? And when are we going to stand up and be loud and be angry that we are being poisoned in the name of making somebody else money and making someone lifelong customers of the medical industry, which is also another reason that we haven't talked about yet, but with forced vaccines creating medical issues, you create a lifelong customer of the pharmaceutical industry. I'm going back to myself and just talking to you about my history. There's no medications, there's no alcohol, there's nothing for me. I've progressed from whole food to nothing but red meat and water. And I absolutely know, even the doctors have told me now, because we've gotten rid of cancer, that yeah, they know that that's possible, and we wouldn't have cancer if we would just stop eating carbs and the sugar that are fueling cancer. So we have to have someone in place that not only is willing to make the hard choices, and I have for the last 8 years as sheriff, but is also living it, completely living it, and is going to not only educate the rest of California, but make sure that we implement those things to keep us healthy and get us out of this medical environment that we've been forced into.
Yeah, and Lewis Herms, your final thoughts.
Yeah, I think you need a person that's an anti-politician, which I've already been dubbed the anti-politician, the we the people guy, because I've gone around the country for 6 years talking about all this stuff and fighting against these establishments. In fact, there's something called the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, that rates me #1 guy to go after in California for 3 years running. Why is that? Because I've been going deeply after Big Pharma. I've been going after corrupt governments, so on and so forth. So much so, on my true tours, I was poisoned not once, but twice on these tours because of the work that I'm doing. I believe you need somebody that is willing to put it all on the line, but also has the protocols, the patience, and the mentality to get it done. I think you can find me at hermsforcali.com, hermsforcali.com. I think you'd be pleasantly surprised.
And Steve Hilton, your final thoughts.
So I just wanted to say, first of all, how much I've enjoyed this. It's been really, really great. I love the fact that we've all, had different perspectives, but very much on the same page. I think that's really encouraging for our state, for our party, for this whole agenda. It's really, and what a big change that now we in the Republican Party, we are the champions of all of these things that in the past might have been associated with other parties or other groups. I think that's really great progress. I think that what I'd like to say, I just also want to say how much I've enjoyed learning about everyone's, my colleagues' personal stories here, particularly Chad. We go at each other and we have these debates, but I really admire and respect what you've laid out in terms of your personal commitment. That's super interesting and inspiring, actually. I just want to say this perspective on it, give this perspective on it. Of course, there's the policy changes we want to make across all the issues we've discussed. We won't get to make them unless we actually win, unless we win elections and we can do all this stuff. And I think that this agenda, the MAHA agenda, is one of the crucial ways we can win this year, because there's such a movement behind this in California. So many people, from the parents, from the farmers, there's so many people furious with what's going on. And if we lead the way on this, I think it will help us get that big victory in November.
And Leo Zacky, your final thoughts.
I mean, I've been doing it. I'm creating businesses that are for the people, that are environmentally friendly, that are trying to help clean up the environment, that are trying to create healthy food for everybody, healthy sources of food, or nutraceuticals that can help make people better and healthier. I mean, these are things that I've been actively working on for years. I mean, we've got a MAHA affiliation with our phytotech company. This is stuff that I'm doing. This is why I'm in this, because there is freedoms at stake, and our medical freedom is absolutely paramount. It's a huge part of what I'm doing. But my family's business was destroyed by California. That's what got me into this. I got to see the corruption at Sacramento's level, at the DC level. I know how bad it is. I know who these people are, and I know how the machine works. It's destroyed my family's business, and I'm not going to let it destroy anybody else's life. I'm here fighting for my home state. I'm a fourth generation Californian. I've got a ag business background. I'm here for the people. I know there's all these crazy things out there that have been labeled conspiracy theory in the past, these things I've always talked about, and I'm here to actually fix it. I know what it takes. Look, as a governor, I can appoint the regulators, I can write the budget, I can set the priorities, and I can veto the garbage. That's what I'm here to do. It's about people over party. Okay? Let's make California healthy again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to thank each of the candidates for being here tonight, being willing to step into a serious conversation on these issues that matter deeply to California families. I also just want to say, as well, as the CEO of Pickaxe, as a social media platform, we're trying to foster more of these kinds of conversations that actually bring about resolution, and actually we can find either common ground and discuss and debate, as opposed to a lot of the mudslinging that you're seeing on a lot of the social media platforms. So we're going to be doing more of these kinds of things. So if you guys do want to download the app, you guys can do that in the iOS App Store or the Google Play Store, or just go to pickaxe.com as well and check that out. But I also want to thank everyone who submitted questions and helped make this town hall grounded in the real concerns of real people. A special thank you to the We the People team for helping organize this event, for OAN for simulcasting, and to Children's Health Defense for helping to spread the word about tonight's town hall. And most of all, thank you all for watching. Your attention matters, your voice matters, and your willingness to stay engaged in the fight for truth, health, and freedom in California matters more than the political establishment would like to admit. Thank you for tuning in, and good night.